Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This is a very tragic situation.
A body now discovered a week and a half after flames ripped through a Gastown building. Also,
for me, it's still like a dream or something like that.
An emotional reunion at YVR as a Ukrainian woman finally touches down.
At some point, the people working in the system begin to crumble and fail.
And complaints about wait times at BC walk-in clinics and why doctors and patients say enough is enough.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin with more sad news from that massive fire that tore through a Gastown building earlier this month. We learned this afternoon that a body had been found, and now just moments ago, we've confirmed a second body in the rubble. Dan Burrett joins us live from the scene once again tonight. Dan, just a heartbreaking situation. What more can you tell us?
Anita, we confirmed that news a few moments ago, and if you have just a quick look behind me, you can see the pole from the truck that says Serving with Pride from Vancouver Fire Services. Crews are up there as we speak. You can't see them working. They're covered by the building. That's probably for the best anyway, where they have discovered a second victim. Now, it was at around 11:30 this morning when crews were looking from above while doing this demolition work. That's when the fire chief says they saw something on the third floor on the south side of this building, and that's when they discovered the first body.
This building has been very risky and dangerous, and too dangerous to put our staff in, and so we have not been able to go in physically, and so we needed the demolition process, and that's where we've discovered.
Now, after the April 11th fire, which fire crews now blame on unattended candles, officials said all but one person had been accounted for. The Winters Hotel housed about 70 or so people in the SRO on the upper floors. There were more than 70 others in another hotel who were forced out, and many of those have found separate accommodation or given separate shelter. We don't yet know who either victim is in this case, but we know that yesterday a woman talked to CBC News from the scene who says she claimed that a woman's body was still inside the building. She says that victim lived there about 7 years, but family members could not reach her or find her. CBC News asked the coroner and Atira, the agency that runs the hotel, about that first body and the claim that the woman was still inside. They have declined to comment.
Dan, some very sad news on an already sad story. What about the demolition here? Will that continue?
Well, you're not seeing much work right now because they have essentially paused that. Earlier in the day, work crews said they were going to figure out probably around this time, 6 o'clock, whether or not they would keep working through the weekend. This building, more than a century old, was supposed to be torn down by today, but they were hit by delays and reports that some people had gone inside to try to get personal possessions. Now, with the discovery of a second body, it's not clear whether or not that work will continue. That second victim will need to be removed from this site, and that will be very delicate work. Fire crews have, in fact, not gone in. They haven't gone through the building because it's simply too dangerous for them to do so. So that first victim was found when the demolition work was doing excavation work. As for the victims, at least for the first one, Chief Karen Fry talked about this earlier today.
This individual has a family and friends, and this is a very tragic situation and something hopefully we're going to be able to avoid in the future. Again, these are some of our most at-risk people in our community, and we need to continue to do a better job as a province looking after these people in our housing units.
It will now be up to the coroner to identify the two victims. We're going to try and find out any more information we can about what's happened here today. Again, two victims found in the now gutted Winters Hotel, and it is up to the coroner, as we said, to identify them. Anita?
Dan Burrett live tonight in Gastown. Thank you, Dan. And in Prince George, police are investigating yet another suspected arson there. Two fires happened on the morning of April 18th, the first around 4 a.m. A home engulfed in flames, and that cause is inconclusive. But the second happened minutes after and tore through a business on 3rd Avenue. That one is being investigated as arson. Prince George RCMP are calling for witnesses and surveillance video to help find leads on potential suspects. They're trying to find the driver of this full-sized two-tone pickup truck seen on 3rd Avenue that morning. One person is dead after a chain reaction crash involving a train, a flatbed truck, and an SUV in Maple Ridge. The crash happened just before 6 yesterday evening on the train tracks near 272nd Street and Lougheed Highway. RCMP say the flatbed truck was trying to cross the tracks when the back of its trailer was hit by the train. The impact sent the truck into an SUV, causing it to roll and trap the driver inside. First responders tried to free the woman in the SUV, but she died on scene. With 1 million people already without a doctor in this province, there are complaints that wait times here for walk-in clinics are getting worse. One company says it has data to back that up. As Isabelle Regem tells us, the BC's health minister is dismissing the claims.
A couple of years ago, you could always get in. Now you can't get in.
Walking right into a walk-in clinic, a thing of the past for C. Kane, who is feeling lucky to have gotten an appointment here at all.
They're at their capacity.
And at their breaking point, according to some doctors.
We can only rely on altruism to provide healthcare to a certain degree. At some point, the people working in the system begin to crumble and fail.
Around 1 million British Columbians are without a family doctor. Dr. Fernandez says that means delayed screenings and visits, but also longer wait times. And new data is painting a picture of just how bad they are.
We partner with the walk-in medical clinics directly, and their staff use our system to update their wait times throughout the day.
Tech company Medimap looked at wait times across the country using data collected in 2021. It found BC had the longest waits among provinces using the system, an average of 58 minutes, double the national average. Of the top 10 cities with the longest waits, 6 are in this province. Victoria tops the list with an average of 2.5 hours. And perhaps most surprising, the company says wait times are down in all provinces except here.
We saw wait times go up from 2019 to 2021 by about 35%.
While the data does not include all provinces and human error by clinic staff is possible when inputting waits, the company says the numbers back what British Columbians have already been voicing. BC's health minister is dismissing the findings as marketing for the company. He's pointing to government efforts, including the opening of several new urgent care centers in recent months.
It takes a long time to train a nurse. It takes a long time to train a doctor. And so we need some immediate action now, and that's why all of these measures that we put in place in primary care are so important, and we clearly need more.
Dr. Fernandez says among the change needed is a review of provincial fees paid to doctors, which she says have not kept pace with mounting operation costs.
The great resignation that we've seen in other professions, well, it's here now.
And without urgent action, she fears there will be fewer doctors and even longer waits. Isabelle Regem, CBC News, Vancouver.
The woman who for decades pretended to be a nurse and school teacher in at least 3 provinces, including BC, has been sentenced. Bridget Clairot pleaded guilty in January to 7 offenses, including impersonation, assault with a weapon, and assault. She's been sentenced to 7 years for impersonating a nurse at 2 health facilities in Ottawa and for using needles on patients when unqualified. Clairot has been in custody in Ottawa since her arrest last August. Her next appearance is in Vancouver in May on fraud and impersonation charges. Well, they pivoted during the pandemic, swapping spirits for hand sanitizer. But despite hefty upfront costs, BC Distilleries say they're now being told by the province to stop production because of limited demand. The CBC's Janella Hamilton spoke to some businesses about the sudden surplus.
Steep it, cook it for about an hour.
Clay Potter's the co-owner of Moon Underwater Distillery in Victoria. one of the BC distilleries that began producing hand sanitizer when the need was immense and supply uncertain.
It took a bit of trial and error to learn how to make it properly and to get it tested.
It took time and money to help keep Canadians safe, actions the government had endorsed. He invested in ingredients and equipment and planned to keep making it for customers until the province said earlier this month to stop because of limited demand, giving distillers the next 2 weeks to end production.
We'll probably make as much as we can before the deadline's up.
Selling sanitizer won't make him rich, but he says it still makes a difference after business took a major hit during the pandemic.
We had a lot of beer that went stale, and we still haven't quite recovered. And for us, rather than dumping it, we've been distilling it into sanitizer.
The sanitizer is made under the temporary go-ahead of BC's Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, the same agency now telling distillers they have until November to sell or donate the rest of their sanitizer.
A huge chunk of those distilleries that cut off like a full arm to supply their communities to help out in a time of need. And not only did they not get help for it, but now they're effectively double paying for it because they've got this product which could maybe help them recoup some of that cost.
He says trust has been broken since the province alluded to supporting distillers when the industry was called on to help. Instead, Canada purchased sanitizer from overseas.
After all of that, provincial and federal governments go out and buy cheap internationally made hand sanitizer and bypass the ones that have had their back. That's a slap in the face.
And because the market was flooded with imported sanitizer, he says some BC distilleries are left with stockpiles of what they made. The province says it will consult with businesses and may grant an extension. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The rising cost of living has been front and center for Canadians this week, with the country's inflation rate rising to a 31-year high. And while it often feels like goods are getting more expensive, it also feels hard to quantify unless you're like our GP Mendoza and you've got receipts. He's looking at his grocery bills 2 years apart.
We all know the cost of food and household items is rising in Canada, but do you know exactly how much more you're paying? Well, I found this receipt from a grocery store from December 2020. I'm going to go back to the same store today and see which items are more or less expensive. Okay, so first on the list we have some large eggs. In December 2020, they were $3.08. See, the same pack now is going for $4.59. Next thing I'm noticing is bananas are $1.46 a kilo. Now they're $1.52. So in 2020, this pack of hickory smoked turkey went for $5.67, and now it's $6.49.
Yeah, I'm definitely noticing that. I bought something the other day that normally is about $7, and now it was $9.99. So I think we're feeling that across the board for sure. That was CBC video producer Gianpaolo Mendoza. She once called Vancouver home, but a Ukrainian evacuee suddenly finds herself back in the city after fleeing her war-torn town east of Kyiv. As the CBC's Rafferty Baker explains, her sudden return was made possible thanks to help from an old friend.
It's been a brutal 2 months for Ukrainians. Regular bombing, night and day. Cities under siege. The United Nations reports more than 2,000 civilians have been killed and more than 4 million have fled. Olesia Petlenko is one of those millions. She was living with her parents in a town to the east of Kyiv when the war began. Missiles hit nearby, so, like so many others, they made the trip west to Lviv. Now, Petlenko used to live in Vancouver. A few years ago, she met Christina Brock here in BC and struck up a friendship. The day Russia invaded, Brock immediately thought of her friend in Ukraine.
She was giving me voice messages on Facebook Messenger, and it was sheer terror. I was crying.
We just surrounded. I don't know what to say. We're just preparing for the worst.
I was constantly worried about her. If something had happened to her, I would be devastated.
Petlenko left her parents in Ukraine. She traveled to Poland, where she was able to get a Canadian work visa. But it was Brock and a group of friends who pulled together enough cash for the flight to Vancouver. It's an anxious wait at the airport. The flight is on time, but still, the hours tick by. Others are also waiting for loved ones who have fled Ukraine. This man and his son are expecting his 75-year-old father. But still, Brock nervously waits. Has her friend been stopped by immigration officials? Was she able to board the flight? Finally, she emerges and sees a familiar face.
My luggage. I just can't believe that I made it to Canada. For me, it's still like a dream or something like that. I'm still thinking that tomorrow I'll wake up and I'm still going to be in Ukraine.
She'll look for work and send money to her parents. But even after arriving in Vancouver, she's already talking about returning home to Ukraine.
And it's hard for me. My heart is still there.
Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
Crowds gathered outside Vancouver City Hall today to mark the 52nd anniversary of Earth Day. The annual event aims to mobilize people and celebrate and protect the planet. It has happened every April 22nd since 1950. More than 1 billion people in 193 countries take part in events like tree planting, beach cleanups, or going vegetarian for a day to help mark the occasion. Canada today announced millions in funding for BC salmon restoration.
Today, we're announcing another 22 new projects that have been approved, totaling $30.5 million in funding. Of these projects, 18 will be led by or undertaken in partnership with Indigenous organizations and communities across British Columbia.
Murray says the dedication to wild salmon is especially important now as stocks are in decline. She says since 2019, Ottawa has launched 80 conservation programs in BC. Meanwhile, North Vancouver MP Jonathan Wilkinson launched this year's tree planting season in New Westminster today as part of Ottawa's 2 Billion Trees program.
It's partly about urban trees, but it's also partly about these vast landscapes where we actually have to restore habitat for species. So I'm very happy. This is about healing the planet.
As you might expect, the program promises to plant 2 billion trees over the next decade. Wilkinson says at least 30 million were planted last year alone. The 2 billion number aims to restore habitats, increase biodiversity, and help Ottawa reach its climate change targets. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now from a beautiful sunny day. And Joe, you're part of a special Earth Day conversation that CBC put on with high school students. Always interesting to hear from young people when it comes to climate.
Yes.
What were your impressions?
First of all, Anita, impressed. That was definitely the big takeaway. This was part of a CBC Ask panel with other fellow climate change journalists here at CBC. We spoke to 60 high schools across the country, from Cape Breton through Somerset, many high schools here on the West Coast and as far north as Nunavut, posing the question, how should media talk about climate change, given that they're going to take the full brunt of our changing climate? Take a listen to some of their questions.
How can we make sure that the topic of climate change does not get drowned out?
How do we talk about climate change with people who don't believe it's real?
What are some more positive ways of reporting about climate change?
How do you think media in more developed and educated countries like Canada can help raise awareness about climate change?
And overall, the sentiment was really that students want media to talk more solutions-based stories that will inspire them, more about eco-anxiety. They want to hear more about social equity, new technologies, and they want climate change to be front and center in the headlines, even with everything else going on in the news. So the conversation continues, but I was grateful for that chat. And yes, it is a gorgeous Earth Day today across Metro Vancouver. 13 at YVR, 14 out towards Abbotsford, and a 15 in Hope. And I think we can get a couple more degrees for our Saturday and continued sunshine. You can see a little bit of cloud rolling in the Pacific. That's going to bring some showers to Padagwai this weekend. But for the South Coast, it is looking like a lovely start to the weekend. Just taking you through the overnight a few high clouds. We did have some lovely cumulus today to kick off the end of the week. Right through Saturday, though, mainly clear skies. I think that green you're seeing in my forecast model, I think those are afternoon cumulus, not spits and spots. But as we head into Sunday, we may actually see something more in line of spits and spots. So I'll track it out for you coming up.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
A new take on the Invictus Games is coming to BC. For the first time ever, the Games will feature winter sports.
We have selected Vancouver and Whistler to host our first ever Winter Hybrid Games in Canada in 2025.
Today, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, announced the Games will be coming to British Columbia for 2025, with the competition taking place in not one, but two municipalities, Vancouver and Whistler. Local First Nations will work closely with organizers to make sure Indigenous protocols are respected.
There's a lot of Indigenous war veterans that have represented their country, and for them to see this magnitude of the Games come to Vancouver, I think is going to be something special.
Started by Prince Harry in 2013, the competition is comprised of wounded and ill military personnel. More than 500 competitors from 20 nations are expected to compete in 2025. Well, CBC's search for the best small town in BC is quickly coming to an end. Last night, Kimberley beat out Smithers in the Battle of the Interior and the North, securing a spot in the final two. But as Justin McElroy reports, it faces stiff competition from a popular community on Vancouver Island.
80 ski runs, 42 restaurants, just one stoplight, and the largest municipal park in the province. And now, Kimberley can add one more thing to its list, a finalist for the best small town in BC. It defeated Smithers last night, which means on Monday, the vote is Kimberley versus Ucluelet for the best. Now, when you take a look at the stats, it's interesting. Kimberley, a lot more people, and it's people within the town that have been voting for it. Whereas Ucluelet, it's been more tourists who have come to the West Coast and love that wilderness, love that ocean, who have been voting for it. Now, that being said, there's a lot to like about Kimberley too, a lot that's interesting for tourists. We're in this nature park right now, and you can see how stunning it is, but it's an interesting style matchup. You have the mountain town versus the ocean town. Both are great. Only one can win the best. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Kimberley.
Surveillance cameras on Vancouver streets, what a city councillor is proposing and what an expert says it means for your privacy. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, Earth Day is being recognized across the country, as you heard earlier, with environmentalists hosting events in person for the first time in 2 years. In Winnipeg, an exchange district is looking for creative ways to deal with plastic waste. CBC's Emily Brass explains.
So I'm going to gently put in a piece at a time for Julian to pedal.
It's a good workout that's also good for the planet. The Arts Junction unveiled new equipment for Earth Week, a pedal-powered machine to shred plastic that's not accepted in the city's Blue Box program.
You think, oh, plastic, that's just, I'll just send it off to the recycling depot, and that's not always the case.
Much of the plastic Canadians throw into recycling bins isn't actually recycled. Plastic waste is routinely shipped to developing countries and dumped. The lightweight material often blows away, polluting waterways. Arts Junction teamed up with bike recyclers at the Wrench to make the machine. The shreds will be melted down and injected into molds. The plastic can then be fashioned into all kinds of useful items. The depot plans to make storage crates from the chips. Everything from drink lids to cannabis containers are tossed into the hopper.
Eventually, we'd love to have a motor attached to it. That's something we're working on. But for now, the bike is just such a fun way to present to the public how the machine works and how you can very much be a part of the recycling effort.
The team plans to take the bike to schools to teach kids about the myths and potential uses for plastic waste.
So it does take a bit of effort, but you're doing it all with just human power, and you can feel the resistance when the plastic goes in. But I'm managing to do it. I'm grinding up plastic.
A pipe cleaner with a little drink lid.
It's all part of its philosophy of creative reuse with a focus on art. Arts Junction is a drop-off point for used supplies to be made into crafts.
We get all sorts of people that come in here, and I like to see them smile when they everything's free here, and they're looking for something, and just the one item can just like brighten up their day.
The depot holds regular workshops on turning trash into treasure, including 2 Earth Week sessions this weekend at the Assiniboine Park Zoo.
There's more than enough materials already on the earth to get creative with. I think that when we focus less on purchasing new, we're able to create an immediate impact on the environment, and there's just no reason not to reuse.
Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Vancouver City Councillors are fielding proposals on how to address the recent rise in violent crime across the city. One is suggesting the city install more CCTV cameras. Councillor Melissa DeGenova has filed a motion to expand CCTV in public spaces, much like the ones installed in New York and London, which also use facial recognition technology. The councillor notes how CCTV footage installed during the 2010 Olympics was instrumental in a random attack on a stranger. The motion is asking council to consult with Vancouver Police to figure out areas that especially need monitoring. Let's dive a little deeper now and look at what impact surveillance can actually have on deterring crime. Joining me now is Assistant Professor at the UBC Allard School of Law, Kristen Thomason. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Kristen, what does your research show around surveillance video and what impact it does have on reducing crime, if there is any?
There's a fair amount of academic research out there that has considered that question of whether CCTV or other kinds of surveillance of public space or other spaces might reduce crime. And there isn't really convincing evidence does anything to actually deter crime. And in fact, there are other suggestions that kind of increase of surveillance of public spaces can bring other risks for policymakers who might be looking to address issues related to crime or other complex social issues, and also for the communities that are affected by that surveillance.
Yeah, and I understand potentially for the victim of a crime, there can be harms. Can you talk about that?
CCTV surveillance is always going to just be reactive. So especially given that we don't have this convincing evidence that it deters crime, at most, it might capture imagery of a crime that has taken place. So that doesn't necessarily do a lot for a victim who has already experienced, say, violence or some other kind of conduct that is harmful. In addition to that, there's a big assumption, I think, in the reliance on surveillance, especially general surveillance of public spaces, that video footage is going to be used, is going to be useful, is going to be helpful to the victim in some way. There's no guarantee necessarily of how that evidence is going to be used, whether it might actually be useful in vindicating a victim, let's say, and also how it will be interpreted and used in, say, a criminal law process. So if there's a criminal proceeding that follows and relies on that video evidence, it might not inherently support the victim or their explanation of how they perceived events unfolding. So there are a lot of assumptions around the use of CCTV or other kinds of surveillance of public space to address crime that don't necessarily pan out. And we can see evidence of cases where that has not panned out in the way that we might expect otherwise.
Yeah, I think from the outside looking in, I made some of those assumptions for sure. I do imagine, though, that CCTV isn't completely bad. So what are some of the ways that it can be effective?
A study that I'm thinking of is that in parking garages, having CCTV cameras can reduce the number of car break-ins, or can correspond with a reduced number of car break-ins in that specific car garage after the surveillance cameras have been installed. There's always a question of whether that has just deflected, different types of conduct to another area that has less surveillance cameras, but there is some suggestion that in very narrow circumstances, CCTV surveillance can have that impact. But I would also say that there's a lot of evidence and research and writing that has been done around the negative impacts that CCTV surveillance can have on public spaces. So that always needs to be balanced, I think, hand in hand. The limited evidence of the sort of specific context where CCTV can be quite useful or may be useful with the potential negative impacts.
Kristen Thomason is with UBC's School of Law studying privacy in public. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Fighting now rages across eastern Ukraine. With Russian forces making gains, the defending soldiers vow they will win back. When we return, what President Zelensky is saying about the Kremlin's advance.
Our planet and we are to blame. But Earth Day organizers claim annual events like theirs is reversing that trend through education.
You can make a difference. You really can make a difference by recycling and reducing your heat and reusing plastic bags. And don't bring another plastic bag into your home. Just reuse the ones you've got.
Do you do anything at home to help clean up the environment?
Well, we do a lot of composting and try to keep our waste down as much as we can.
I've stopped taking a lot of bags and stuff from grocery stores. I just put things directly into my bag, into my purse that I'm carrying. We recycle like glass and tins and newspapers and stuff. And diapers. Yeah, I use cloth diapers.
So at the company, we've banned the use of styrofoam cups for all employees. We've suggested they all bring in coffee mugs. We have a recycling program for all our photocopy papers. We put it in barrels and recycle that.
But are enough of us changing our wayward ways to save the Earth? Environmental groups say that we just have to look at the Lower Mainland's record over the last year to see that we are still destroying our planet. An oil spill in Vancouver Harbour killed hundreds of birds. Pulp mill pollution led to the closure of Howe Sound to commercial shellfishing. Forests were wiped out by clear-cutting. A Simon Fraser University expert on natural resource management says we must act now.
The coastal areas are in decline all around. The most productive marine areas in the world are in decline all over this planet, so that the problems are on a scale that we haven't seen before.
McGonigal says it'll take more than individual effort and events like Earth Day to stop the destruction of our planet. It'll take major changes in industry and our lifestyle, and there will likely be a lot more debate before that happens. Carol Forbes, CBC News, Vancouver.
They are elementary school children making posters for Earth Day. They are also the first generation of children fully familiar with the jargon of environmentalism.
We get recycled bags in our building.
Their parents worried about nuclear war. These children worry about the Earth.
The Earth can really be beautiful if there isn't really much pollution, and tearing down the rainforest for factories that also cause pollution.
I don't want the animals to die.
The hope is that on April 22nd, hundreds of millions of people around the globe will do something to care for or celebrate the Earth. They'll be planting trees in Moscow. They'll be picking garbage off Mount Everest. They'll be rallying on Parliament Hill and marching in Vancouver. They will be attending concerts and native sunrise ceremonies from St. John's to Victoria.
All we are saying.
20 years ago, only a handful of Canadians marked the first largely American Earth Day. But now the threats to the planet are international: global warming, ozone depletion, destruction of the rainforest.
The Earth is beautiful, and I hope it will stay beautiful.
1 week from today, people have a chance to send that message. The organizers say if they do, it could launch a decade of environmental activism. But if they don't, it would be a decade of lost opportunity.
Turning now to the war in Ukraine and a grim acknowledgement today from the British Prime Minister. Intelligence shows that fighting could drag on well into next year and that Russia could win. Today, Russia outlined its expanding ambitions along with eastern Ukraine. A senior general says Russia now wants its neighbor's entire south, much of which it already controls. In the southern city of Odessa, residents fear they may soon face the horrors unleashed in Kharkiv and Mariupol. David Common has the latest on the fighting and those struggling to survive it, and a warning some of the images are graphic.
Russia claims its cruise missiles and artillery strike 1,000 targets a day. Their presentation of the fight, quick to show off Russian might, complete with propaganda-worthy welcomes. The warring nations will soon each celebrate Orthodox Easter. But Ukraine's president says Russia has refused any ceasefire. This tells you everything about their faith, says Volodymyr Zelensky. We just hope life will conquer death. It hasn't in Mariupol, where many dead are buried in rubble. 9,000 others may have been dumped here by the Russians in a mass grave, according to Mariupol's city council. Galena Morovska was in Mariupol when a missile slammed into her hostel. I had 50 children, little children, and pregnant women there, she tells us in hospital.
Rocket fall down. They broken first floor, second.
Galena was already a widow. Her husband killed in a battle with the Russians 5 years ago. This time, war found her. This is Galena 6 weeks ago. As bad as this looks, it gets worse.
This is his daughter.
That's her daughter. Yeah. Natalia doesn't have this eye anymore, she says. Her wounds will last a lifetime, a life that was in many ways just beginning.
This is his daughter before war. They must leave.
I have no words, Galena says. In the same hospital is Vasil Cherevko. A missile landed in his village near Zaporizhia, breaking his leg. Heart problems threaten to take him now from his wife, Raisa. 2 of their sons are soldiers. The third they haven't heard from in 6 weeks when Russian soldiers were headed into his house. I feel horror, pain, and anxiety, Raisa tells us. It's very hard. Joy is not completely absent. Life mercifully goes on for Galena's grandchildren. In a shelter when the bombs were raining down, they now give her hope, a rarity in war. David Common, CBC News, Lviv.
Meanwhile, India's leader today calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine. For many, it's a call that falls well short of a clear condemnation of Russia's aggression. Salima Shivji now with a look at how India and its leader view their relationship with Moscow.
In the bustle of daily life in Mumbai, the war in Ukraine feels distant, and not just geographically.
We are against any kind of war.
But India's record at the United Nations,
India has abstained
on vote after vote that condemns Russia,
India decided to abstain.
is very popular here.
India cannot ignore the fact that Russia has been their ally for that many years.
That practical view, a reluctance to denounce Russian aggression, is largely the consensus in India across generations.
Ashita and Rajvi, childhood friends, are paying attention. They aren't big fans of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but both applaud what they see as his strong, neutral stance on the war.
Not being bullied by some country that's a superpower.
A plus, even as it pains them to see signs of atrocities committed in Ukraine.
We are Indians, we are emotional, but we have to realize the political issues also that the country is facing. So we have to be a little neutral.
The issues, India is surrounded by foes, China and Pakistan. And Russia, a longtime friend, is the source of some 2/3 of the country's tanks and weapons. The UK's Boris Johnson is just the latest in a steady stream of Western leaders to visit, cajoling, all while promising not to lecture India.
Our new and expanded defence and security partnership.
Instead, Johnson is throwing his support behind Indian-made fighter jets to wean the country off its dependence on Russian ones. Still, experts say repeated visits from the West won't change much.
West is doing what it is doing in terms of its national interest, and we have to protect our national interest, which is being served both by our stronger ties with the United States as well as maintaining the stability of our ties with Russia.
And with warnings the war could last years, India's delicate balancing act could too, with its people firmly behind continued neutrality. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
In Europe, voters in France head to the polls on Sunday in a presidential election with high stakes. Current leader Emmanuel Macron is looking to hold on to his job and fend off right-wing candidate Marine Le Pen. As Karen Pauls reports, the vote could be closer than expected.
Friday morning, and this Paris street market is bustling. Like other vendors here, this cheesemonger says the presidential campaign hasn't caught her attention. She says she's more interested in customers coming to buy her cheese. Many young people are more interested, especially if they voted for a far-left candidate who just missed getting on this Sunday's ballot. They're now assessing their options.
We don't have much choice when we come to votes because none of the candidates really bring us what we want.
Maybe Macron, maybe. It's complicated.
Incumbent President Emmanuel Macron is fighting for all the support he can get, trying to win over those voters by saying he's the only alternative to stop the far right. He says voters can count on him.
Comptez sur moi.
In a rematch of 2017, Macron is facing Marine Le Pen in this runoff vote. An anti-immigration, anti-European Union candidate, she supports a ban on Muslim head coverings in public. But Le Pen has modified her tone and tapped into anger over the cost of living. I'm a patriot who will do what's necessary for the French people, she says, through the preservation of national sovereignty. This political analyst says many people are not voting for Macron, they're voting against Le Pen.
If Macron gets reelected and tries to govern as though it was business as usual, that would be a terrible mistake because, these voters are not, their resentment is not going away.
Pundits say Macron won the debate on Wednesday, and polls suggest his lead is widening. But there is still a growing sense of discontent here. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Paris.
Back here in Canada, Ottawa is finally addressing a crisis that had left thousands of international students in limbo. Immigration Canada had paused a program that many newcomers relied on to qualify for permanent residency. Rafi Boudjikanian takes a closer look at Ottawa's plan.
There are literally hundreds of thousands of jobs available in sectors right across the economy that are waiting to be filled.
The Immigration Department admits the economy is outpacing the number of job applicants. So it's restarting programs it froze during the pandemic to allow many international students and postgrads with Canadian work experience a fast track to permanent residency.
This is going to give peace of mind to a lot of people.
It's been months and months of anxiety, anger.
Abhishek Anthony has an IT job in Waterloo, Ontario. He financially supports his wife and kids in India and hopes to bring them here one day. Anthony's work permit expires in June. That's a month before the government resumes express entry draws.
I will have to stop working. I don't have any other solution.
Though details aren't quite spelled out yet, Ottawa says workers whose permits expired after January will be able to reapply.
Our immediate demand, immediate ask is give us an interim relief with an extension, and whenever the draws happen, let it happen.
Renewing permits also depends on employers playing ball, pouring time and money into filling out forms and vouching for their workers, a challenge as businesses deal with a post-pandemic labor shortage, says this advocate.
That means the employer has to jump through a lot of hoops in order to get them a work permit, and a lot of them won't qualify because their jobs don't meet the prevailing wage, or the employer is just not willing to go to the time and expense.
The government is extending the length of new work permits, but for now, people whose paperwork expired before the end of January won't be eligible to renew them. The Immigration Department says it's willing to be flexible, but it expects the majority of potential express entry applicants to be covered by today's announcement. Rafi Bujikani, CBC News, Ottawa.
At 6:43 tonight, a live look at the Lions. What a beauty day. And when we come back, Joe joins us with the full forecast. We'll find out if the sunshine is going to last or if the clouds will roll back in.
I'm definitely not looking at it.
Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Are you contemplating going to a ball for the first time?
Not sure whether you should be storming the runway, cheering loudly, or silently observing.
Maybe you're cisgender, straight, or white. Maybe you're all three, in which case you might want to go to a Justin Bieber concert instead. Just kidding. All are welcome at a ball.
Facts. A ball thrives off of the energy of the room, so spectators are key. But before you show up, here's some tips on how to show up. Hi, I'm Cuarta.
And I'm Tristan Mugler, and we're going to go through some do's
and don'ts
of ball etiquette.
Let's do it. Do your research, and don't forget your place.
When it comes to the balls, first-timers are always welcome. I mean, we were all virgins at one point.
At least I think I was.
But still, there is no excuse for not knowing what's going to go down at a ball.
Girl, you got the internet. Look that shit up. But seriously, even though balls look like a party, they're actually carefully curated events. Everything and everyone has its place. Come in knowing your history, who's it for, and what to expect.
Knowledge is power. You'll have more fun.
Do get inspired.
I don't really know if it's pronounced KO. But don't do it now. Get the fuck off my runway, girl. A couple of YouTube tutorials and 6 shots of Henny doesn't mean it's your time to shine. Categories call for a specific look and specific moves, and chances are you don't know them.
This is your first time, just like watch and enjoy the show. And if after that the runway's still calling your name, then you gotta study, prepare, and plan to walk a virgin category at the next ball. Do cheer for everybody. Don't boo.
The pioneer Junior LaBeija once said, "It do take nerve to walk a ball, cause you bitches can be fierce." Yes, this is a competition, but at the end of the day, we are here to celebrate each other. So let's keep the vibe positive. Do make a contribution, but don't throw your money at us like we some...
Just kidding. Give us your money. Cash is our love language. And balls are expensive events for us. Performers, the houses, the organizers. So even a little helps. You see a performer that you like? Tip her. Just do it respectfully. Do take pictures, but don't block the judges.
We all want that fire clip, but remember, there is a show happening. So unless you're shooting for Vogue magazine, move out the way. The judges' island need to be clear at all times.
And while you're at it, spread the love. Share, tag, credit the girls in all your photos and videos. We live for a clip. Ew.
Thank you for taking the time to brush up on your ballroom etiquette. Follow these steps, and you'll have a gale time.
If after attending a few balls, you want to get more involved, approach your local Kiki community. There's leaders in every scene that will be more than happy to point you to the right direction.
See you.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. I know you're inside now, Joe, but I'm hoping that that weather that you were standing in is a little sign of what's to come this weekend.
Oh, yeah. I left the deck chair out there, Anita, because, yeah, tomorrow is looking gorgeous across the South Coast. I think we've been owed one nice weekend day, and that is coming for everyone tomorrow. In fact, almost everyone across the province. Let me show you the current temperatures tonight from coast to coast to coast. We're still below seasonal across much of Canada, but we're starting to see some recovery. Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, 8 tonight. And as we head into the end of the weekend, there is a 24-degree forecast for Toronto. And that heat you can see bumping up into Minneapolis. That's what's going to slide into the Great Lakes. It's been another snow day for Calgary today, but Vancouver at a 13. This was a taste of our weather tomorrow. So we're sort of between two systems. That storm that we saw over UBC and western sections of Vancouver last night, that's part of that system that's crossed the Rockies, bringing the snow now. That swirling low really losing its punch for us. That cloud approaching from the west, that will be our Sunday story. So watch as I take you through the next 24 hours. You can see that rain hitting Haida Gwaii. By tomorrow evening, it will start to encroach on the north coast of Vancouver Island, and it'll slowly slide down the island through Sunday, bringing some afternoon showers for Metro Vancouver as it pushes into the south coast. It's not bringing a lot of rain for Sunday, but definitely that's the one of the 2 days that we'll get to see some rain, flowers, and grass. 14 in Victoria tomorrow. I think we could do a little better on the mainland. I'll show you that forecast in a moment. 14 for Williams Lake and Prince George. You've had a lovely run the past couple of days. The system impacting us has not really hit central and northern BC. 18 for Kelowna, and I think we can hit the 20-degree mark for the Okanagan as we head into Sunday. So without further ado, a pretty good looking forecast. 15 for Saturday. We've only had that twice before this season. Coming down a little bit Sunday. Again, it's not a washout, just a few afternoon showers. If you were thinking of heading to the Vancouver Canadians game, still hope for Sunday and definitely looking good for Saturday. Blue skies back for Monday. I know temperatures dip a little with the return of showers for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but I'm still seeing signs as we begin to turn the page to May of a Western Canada warm-up. So keep that in the calendar.
Maybe I'll finally get rid of my parka. I did pull it out
yet,
today.
Anita. Not yet. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, they've returned to our waters, our shores here in BC, but for the first time in 2.5 years, cruise ships are back in PEI. The Viking cruise liner with nearly 300 passengers on board arrived this morning. Steve Bruce says more on how businesses feel about welcoming back tourists.
After setting off from New York, these passengers arrived this morning to wind and rain, though happy to be here nonetheless.
We're fully vaccinated. We booked the trip a while ago and then it got postponed. So it's like, well, as soon as they let us do it, we're ready to do it.
This was originally supposed to be a Prague to Amsterdam cruise in March of 2020, which obviously got canceled. So we kept pushing it back, and we just thought that Canada would be a wonderful place to visit and be close to home and probably as safe as we could get.
Concerns about the safety of cruises in a pandemic kept them all away from PEI for 2 years. Even now, with lots of COVID still around, some in the community have questioned whether welcoming them back is the right call. Passengers we spoke to say not to worry. Per federal regulations, they're all fully vaccinated and had to be tested before boarding the first time, and many ships, including this one, are testing a lot more than that.
Viking has taken exceptional precautions, including having a COVID lab on board. We are tested every morning for COVID.
We have to spit in a little tube every morning. I think they're very good about as far as keeping an eye on everybody.
The head of Port Charlottetown agrees.
From vaccination requirements to, more doctors on ships, more nurses on ships, enhanced medical facilities on board. I mean, they have floating hospitals now for the most part, to handle any isolation or quarantine, and it's a controlled environment.
You'll hear no hesitation from the businesses that rely on cruise passengers spending money on the island, particularly in spring and fall. Among them, the Anne of Green Gables store. It's back open for the season today. The last 2 years, it had to hold off opening until July and cut staff.
We haven't even been able to keep half of our staff on our payroll. So to be able to have, 50, 60 employees coming back this summer and be able to support them, their families, that's just the most important thing to us.
Nessia Nimron opened her jewelry store today for the first time in 2 years. She runs it right in the Port Charlottetown terminal anytime a cruise ship is in town. She's happy to be back making money, however busy the season turns out to be.
I don't think anybody can predict the season in the cruise ships, but
most important thing is they're coming.
Steve Bruce, CBC News, Charlottetown.
A hockey legend has died. The life and legacy of Guy Lafleur is next.
Rayanne Brown didn't intend for her story to become an actual book. She says she always dreamed of writing something that would be published someday, but it has never been her main goal.
The goal when I first started to write this story was just kind of more for my kids, but after submitting it to CBC Books and then being langlisted and it gaining some interest, two publishers actually wanted to publish this story and turn it into a book, which was really exciting. I didn't expect it, but I'm really happy that it happened.
The next night, when it was bedtime in Nunatsiavut, Naya asked Ananok, "Why can't I have a long, fluffy tail?" Ananok pondered for a moment. "Well," she began as she stroked Naya's hair, "perhaps you'll grow a tail tonight in your dreams." "Perhaps," said Naya. Her Nanak pulled her close and touched her nose to Naya's, rubbing gently. "A clinic to help you dream," she said. Naya closed her eyes and began to imagine she was growing a tail as she drifted off to sleep.
This past winter, Brown started reading to school children, including kids from her hometown of Postville.
When I did the readings for my hometown, I think there's like maybe 15 students. That was pretty much the whole school that is in the grades lower than 5, I believe, and they really loved it. And I think they thought it was pretty cool that a book was written by somebody from their hometown and that it mentioned their hometown.
Brown says reading in person is a different experience than doing it virtually.
Yeah, it was great. It was definitely different than doing it online. I was able to flip the pages and hear the children's excitement, and then they got to come up to me afterwards. It was really great. I was nervous, but just having the support there made it all worth it for me.
Suddenly, Naya was nestled in a den underground, her cozy bed no longer underneath her. As she looked around, she saw a long red tail wrapped around her body. It was fluffy and warm. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a squeak came out. She was a fox. "Well," Naya thought happily, "I am a fox, and now I have a tail." Naya crawled from her den by Ranger Bite in Makovik, Nunatsiavut, into the sunlight and began to chase her tail. She chased her tail and chased her tail until she chased it all the way back to her bed. In the morning, when she awoke, she was Naya again.
Brown is hoping the young people who hear her story becoming a published writer will inspire them to follow their dreams too. The book is released nationally next week. Daryl Din, CBC News, Labrador City.
Legendary hockey star Guy Lafleur has died. The NHL Hall of Famer and Montreal Canadiens great had been battling lung cancer. He was known for his speed, his shot, his goal scoring, and his larger-than-life persona. He was 70 years old.
If one stood out among the others, it was Guy Lafleur of the Quebec Remparts. 130 goals in his final junior season. No player has ever scored so many.
I think his biggest asset from a coaching standpoint is his knowledge of the game at such a young age.
When I was a kid, all I wanted to be is to become a hockey player. Not a star, nor a Superman.
A 2-on-1 break. Lafleur over to Lemaire, back to Lafleur. He scores!
He was the best player on the best team, and it's not easy to be a best player. And Guy had a tradition that he had to follow. He was the third in the line of Rocket Richard and Jean Béliveau, and then Guy.
Didn't play much the first 3 years and didn't have any confidence. And I think when Scotty started to play me more, I got more confidence.
Here's Lafleur, score!
Later in his career, when his role became a little diminished, he had a little more difficulty with it. He was basically forced into retirement. And then he played. He didn't play for 3 seasons, then came back with the New York Rangers.
Here it is. Here's Lafleur coming on the ice, and he is getting an immediate standing O. And this is the second one that he's got, and the familiar chant of Guy goes up. Would you have believed it, really?
I heard that my comeback was a joke, but it didn't influence me at all, because when I retired, I was listening too much to people and some friends that they were telling, well, maybe it's time for you to retire,
Good play against the boards by Lafleur. Now it's Miller is centering. Pass, here's Lafleur, scores!
I say he got a goal tonight in his last game at the Forum. Heck, give him the first star anyway.
We spent so many Saturday nights watching you. Given the way you feel about the game, do you watch NHL hockey?
I watched the playoff, and I really enjoyed watching the playoff last year against Calgary and Tampa. It was a great series, and that's what people really enjoy to watch, and it should be like that all year round.
Guy Lafleur, it's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A hockey legend who will be greatly missed. Quebec's premier today saying he wasn't just an athlete, but an artist. Very true words for sure. That's it for tonight's show. Thank you for being with us. And before we leave you to enjoy your weekend, some beautiful photos of BC's largest tulip festival featuring 30 varieties across 20 stunning acres in Chilliwack. Perfect way to get into a sunny springtime mood and capture some amazing photos while you're at it. Have a